Hey friends, welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and today I've got a little bit of a beastie kind of knife. It's not super big, but it's a bigger, chunky knife made by Kubey, designed by Mikkel Willumsen, and it's a flipper. It comes two ways, tanto or drop point blade, speed blast finish or a black wash finish, and this budget version is not very expensive. And they also have, by Kubey, a premium version of this thing as well. Are you interested in a bigger knife made by a designer of tactical knives? Stick around. I'm going to tell you all about it. I'll do a teardown. I'll go over all the measurements and tell you what I think of it. All right, let's take a good close look at this thing. Comes in G10. You got 5 main colors of G10. That's a solid G10. They've also got a Damascus for this. And as I told you in the introduction, you've got a drop point blade. You can also get a tanto blade. So then I guess there's a total of 12 different ways to get this knife. Plus they've got some premium versions of this. They've got a titanium frame lock variant, and it has M390 for the blade instead of AUS 10. So that comes, I think, 4 different ways. Well, two versions of a drop point, 2 different titanium colors, basically the flat gray and this rainbowy kind of scalloped thing. And then you've got the tanto and the drop point. So that's 4 different ways for that. So that makes it 16 different ways to get this knife if you want it, unless there's some exclusives out there that I don't know about. I didn't go hunting around for the exclusives. In Canada, basically what I found was the G10 AUS 10 versions, not the frame lock versions anywhere, at least not anywhere that has them in stock in Canada. Bead blast finish. Or you can get a black wash finish. I prefer stone wash finish over bead blast, but I'm not going to berate that right now. Mikkel Willumsen is a Dutch guy. He's been designing knives for, I don't know, pretty close to 30 years now. And he knows what he's doing as a designer. But I'm still not super happy with this knife. It's okay, and I'll tell you what I think of it in detail a little bit later on. Let's go over this blade shape. I like this drop point. It almost comes to like a spear point kind of tip. You know, drop point, belly comes back. Chunky piece of steel here. And again, I'll do all the measurements and dimensions later on. Saber type grind, flat grind that comes up a little over halfway towards the spine. That's going to be a tough piece of steel. AUS 10 is a decent stainless steel. Nice wedge here, and it's a little bit thicker at the tip than it is for most of the rest of this edge. And this edge is just thin enough to be useful. Wouldn't mind if it was a tiny bit thinner, but it's just thin enough to be useful. We've got a forward choil here. I don't like it. I don't like this forward choil. It's too small. You know, Mikkel is, or Mikkel, I'm not sure, because I heard him say his name once. You know, being Dutch, you know, basically it's the Dutch or variant of Mikkel, Mikkel Willumsen. He's a bigger guy. Like, he's not like fat or anything, but he's, you know, your typical tall, big Dutch guy. And I can't see how you can be comfortable using this tiny little forward choil without risking, you know, cutting the side of your finger right there, especially if you sharpen it. From the factory, it's sharp enough. It's not super dangerous, this edge from the factory, just like almost every other knife out there. They're not sharpened super well from factories. And it's still a cutting edge. So if you put your finger in there, especially if you slide it at all, adjusting your grip or whatever, there's a good chance you're going to cut your finger. And they could have just brought this back, like take this exact and bring it back to the handle here, and it would be a bigger circle, and that might fit better. It's not big enough, in my opinion, as a forward choil. that's the basics of the blade. The badging on it, we got Kubey up here on the flat, which is where I prefer it, and at least it's not super large, so that's a good thing. And on this side, designed by Mikkel Willumsen, and that could be smaller. I think that text is a little bit big, but very small right there, AUS 10. It's not over badged, like it's not too billboardy, it's okay. We've got KB right here for Kubey knives. Don't know what the B stands for. Their higher end models start with KB, like the titanium M390 version of this, the frame lock version. They come with two different model numbers depending if you're getting the Tanto or this drop point, and that's the KB 366 for the Tanto, KB 367 for the drop point. And this guy, the model numbers are KU 319C for the drop point, 318, KU 318 for the Tanto. And they're all called the Bravo. So the Bravo is the name that was given to the knife before Kubey's model numbers got smacked onto it. It's a chunky knife. It's big in the handle. My hands are just barely in the extra large range, and I wouldn't want much smaller hands for this. I just wouldn't want smaller hands for this thing. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail. Let's go over the handle a little bit more. It comes flat. There's an angle here, and then another angle, and then a rounded section here. And we've got a huge back spacer. It's got some jimping at the top here. Helps give it some grip. If you do a reverse grip, you know, the jimping doesn't do much. And that's what I wonder about this thing. Why don't you just put the jimping all the way around here to give your thumb a little more grip back here when you've got it in this fighting kind of grip? You don't necessarily use this just for fighting, but some extra grip on that back spacer there would be nice, in my opinion. Flat slab G10, it's chamfered all the way around. We've got T8 screws here. We've got some T6 screws on the pocket clip, but it's a deep pocket clip that goes right or left, which is nice. Big lanyard hole there, and it's like a solid tube because of the back spacer in there, so it's easy to fish paracord through there if you want to. We've got some fairly thick liners, but they're heavily skeletonized. When I take it apart, I'll show you that later on in this video. Lockup. Well, we've got a liner lock, and I think I got the picture for whatever. Lockup's good. It's engaged, it's fully engaged, lots of room for it to wear over. No blade play, side to side, up and down. Lockup's nice and solid. Easy to get at this lock release with the texture on the top to get in there, push it over, and then you start to close the knife. Works just fine. Alignment, very good. Right down the middle like it should be. Kubey's quite good with that most of the time. And it feels like a solid knife in your hand when you're holding it. One thing though, it's more comfortable in the left hand than it is in the right hand. And this is very, very common, especially on knives that have a larger distance this way. The bigger it is from the spine of the handle to where your index finger goes, especially on liner locks, also on frame locks, because they do a cutaway here to get your finger at, this side is smaller than this side. And when you're holding a knife like this, let's see if I can get the blade out of the way. Look at my hand. This is on this angle here. So, which means I'm putting a lot of pressure on this narrow little chamfer right here if I'm holding it hard for extended work. If you're just playing with it and something, it's not that big a deal. But when you're holding it for extended work, there you go. But in this hand, in your left hand, you got an angle right here between this liner and this liner. It's at an angle. It just fits the hand better because your hand grabs it on an angle. Your hand doesn't go straight across. Anybody that's holding a knife like this, now your thumb feels really bad back here. At least mine does. So I don't hold a knife like this, bringing that hand over. I tend to hold them like this so that my thumb goes along the side right there. I suspect most people do the same, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just wrong. So if you're a lefty and you want these big chunky kind of knives, this guy's actually quite comfortable that way. And of course you can put the pocket clip over on that side. Action's good. We've got ceramic ball bearings in there, and I'll show you those in a minute. But I was talking about the pocket clips. Let me finish that. Let me demonstrate how that pocket clip slides over. It's got a little bit of a flat top right there. Goes all the way in, holds on really well. Mostly hides in the pocket. It's an okay pocket clip. It's got no big problems. It's decent. And that's what all I'll say to that thing. You want to see the teardown now? Oh, before I do the teardown, how well does this edge cut? It cuts okay. It's a decent shape. Got lots of belly there. It's not too thick at the edge. It's been sharpened okay, and it cuts pretty good. It's even okay at piercing, you know, with this chamfer here, just the way that tip is made there. It's okay at piercing, especially if you're behind this guard. It's very safe to pierce into something. Even if you bump into something hard, your hand's not going to come up over that edge. So there you go. Pretty decent indeed. So now before I do the measurements, let's tear this thing apart. Let's first show, this is my T6 driver right here. And let's see how much play there is in the screw heads. Yeah, more than I'd like, but it's not terrible. And the screw goes into the screw head just barely enough. So I wouldn't be playing with these screws very often at all, except to move it over to the other side. You don't have to do those screws to take it apart. These T8s, see, they got even less play than those T6s had. So that's a good thing. So let's take these screws out. There's some really nice little screws. And we'll get those out. And the one up here. There's no thread locker anywhere on there, on any of those screws. You can take a closer look at those. Well, actually there is that blue stuff, but that's just a dot on one part of it. They were both sitting like that, and so I couldn't see it before. That doesn't do an awful lot to hold them in there, but a little bit, and there's nothing. Let me see, is there a little bit of residue on this one? I can't see any residue on that one, so I don't think there was any thread locker in there. Let's undo the knife. There's the skeletonizing here. I wish they would have put another hole back here. I didn't show you the balance point, did I? I keep forgetting to do that. The balance point is actually right over, you know, this index finger choil, and hopefully I'll show that later on. We've got ceramic ball bearings here. We've got 9 ball bearings in there, and phosphor bronze cage, pretty decent, a nice good size. And let's take this out. And we've got a round pin with the Kubey notch in there, just like what Civivi does. That grabs onto this spot on the G10 to keep it from spinning. Good thing. And we've got a chunky stop pin, very big chunky stop pin. So let's put this back in here, and I want to show you something else. Where is it going to click? Did I miss it? There we go. Now it's clicked in where it belongs. Before I do that, let's talk about this back spacer, and it's G10 as well. And we've got the studs here. They're not with a little chamfer on it. No step on it, no little ledge. So you have to use a back spacer for this to go together, because if you try to put it together, you're going to be relying on pressure in there on the G10, not on the metal at all. And that's not a good place to put all that pressure, is on that little bit of G10 on the shoulder in there. So you're going to want to use the back spacer. And now for the con that I have on this thing. It's not a big con. I don't like this. So they wanted to hide the stop pin. I'd much rather they had a big stop pin right up here, because that holds it, and it holds right here with the liner lock right there. I think the more space between the points of contact where the pressure is with a lock, all knife locks, all folding knife locks have to put pressure at 3 points in order to hold the lock steady. One of those points is where the pivot pin meets the blade. And, you know, we do have a chunky, thick piece of steel. So it meets right there on the blade. And on the stop pin, where the stop pin meets the blade, and where the liner lock meets the blade, all three of those points work in concert to hold it steady. If those are just a little bit off, that's when you get lock rock and blade play. That's not a good thing. I like these points of contact to be further apart on a tactical kind of knife. And that's what I'm calling this, because Mikkel, he calls himself a tactical knife designer. He designs tactical knives. He also designs kitchen knives and stuff. But he's a tactical knife guy, and so I'd want this to be a little bit more robust. You know, this, I wouldn't call this section in here weak, although it's drilled down in. You still have a fairly thick chunk of steel there. I doubt this thing's going to break. I don't recommend prying with knives anyway, because it's the side-to-side kind of pressure. Like if you were prying something up with this, that would affect the stress in this little spot. I would still like to see this all solid, all the way across from here to here. All this space here, I wish that was all solid steel. It's a tactical knife, and that would be stronger. Now, is this strong enough? Probably. I don't do abusive testing, and so I'm not going to abuse this until it breaks to see where it breaks. But I just, more steel, more strong. It's really that simple. And is this strong enough? Probably. It's probably strong enough. But sometimes you like more strong, right? Let's put this back. Let's put this thing back together again. As is often the case, while I was doing the teardown, I remembered some things I didn't talk about. The detent on this thing, pretty good. It holds it pretty solid. You can even hear it. Good. Flipper, easy to access. Yeah, I didn't demonstrate that before. Can you believe that? Yeah, of course you can believe that. Lots of room for a thumb stud. I wish it had a thumb stud option. I like thumb studs. And thumb stud back here, behind that Y, that's not really going to get in the way of, how far you could plunge this knife into something or something else. Up here, well, maybe. But I wish that was an option. And of course the balance point right there, like I was trying to say, let's see if I can straighten that out a little bit, right where your index finger grips, which is pretty good for the balance point. Jimping on the spine, it's another thing I didn't talk about. And that's nice jimping, I like it. Of course, I wouldn't mind if it went further. When you do use the forward grip, now your thumb, or at least my thumb, goes over this section here. But at least it's got the full width. And then it's this quick chamfer down to this swedge, or the quick transition to the swedge. So at least you got a nice thick spine, slightly rounded off edge right there. So it's not bad. And if you just grip it back here, the jimping's perfect in the perfect spot. So it's okay. Yeah. All right. Dimension, specs, all that stuff now. The weight of this knife, 181 grams, 6.38 ounces. Yeah, it's a big knife. We've got a sharpness from the factory right here. The factory edge here is 245 bests. Yeah, it's not as sharp as I'd like from the factory. It's not hard to sharpen this, no matter how you sharpen knives, especially if you've got a guided sharpening system where you clamp it on up here. Lots of real estate to clamp onto to sharpen this edge. And with this finger choil up here, the forward choil, you can sharpen right to the end here and not risk messing up this plunge. So that's just nicely done right there. The dimensions for the lengths of things, the length of the cutting edge, 86.1 millimeters, 3.39 inches. The length of the tip to the closest spot on the handle is just a tiniest bit less, 85.9 millimeters, 3.38 inches. The thickness of this blade stock, 3.95 millimeters, 0.1555 inches. So a good bit over 1/8 of an inch thick. Blade depth, it's biggest right here close to the heel of the blade, 36.5 millimeters, 1.44 inches. The thickness of this edge behind the grind, it's exactly 0.5 millimeter on average. Tiny bit thicker just in this last little section near the tip. That's 19.5 thousandths of an inch. The angles of sharpening on this thing, this side's got an average sharpening angle of 20.8 degrees. This side's got an average of 21.8 degrees. This side started at 22.4. In the middle, it's 20.6. Near the tip, it's 20.6. This side started at 22.7, and that's basically the last 1/4 of an inch. Then it gets much better. 20.2, 18.4 up here. So 4.3 degrees of change on this side, 1.8 degrees of change on this side. Not terrible. I wish it was done a little bit better, and I wish this edge was done a little bit thinner. Not a lot, just a little bit. For a big, bulky, hard-working knife like this, you know, you don't want it too much under 20 thou. It's just barely under 20 thou now. Because every time you sharpen a knife, it's going to get thicker behind that edge, unless you've got an extreme hollow grind. Which, very uncommon in pocket knives, factory-made pocket knives these days. Rest of the measurements. Handle. The handle length, 116.3 millimeters, 4.58 inches. And this grip area between my thumbnails, it's right around 95 millimeters or 3.7 inches. A little bit more when you use the forward choil, of course. And the thickness of the handle scales, 14.75 millimeters. That's 0.581 of an inch, so a little over 1/2 an inch. Not bad. Like, they could have made it thicker. You know, I've had thicker knives of this kind of size, or chunky, heavy-duty kind of folding budget pocket knife, which is, this knife is all those things. And the handle depth when it's open in the grip, the widest point right here, well, technically right there, but I'm saying right here, 32 millimeters, 1.26 inches. When the knife is closed, the widest point in your pocket's right about here, 45.9 millimeters, 1.81 inches. And the total length of this thing is about 220 millimeters, 7.95 inches. And now the price, how much is this thing? I bought mine at whitemountainKnives.com, had it shipped to a buddy in Nebraska. He took it apart and mailed me the blade and handle separately, while a whole bunch of knives at the same time, so that they could get across the border. $45 at White Mountain Knives, but you can save 10% when you use coupon code CCE at checkout. Makes it $40.50 American. $40.50 for this knife. That's not bad at all. Tanto version's the exact same price. The titanium frame lock with M390, that's $165 before the discount, but you get the 10% off with that. So you save $16.50 on that one with that coupon code. Blades Canada has this only in this budget G10 version, $61.99 Canadian, which is very close to on par with the retail number at White Mountain Knives. So if you're in Canada, you're not wasting a lot of money by going to Blades Canada to get this. So that's where you should go. What are my thoughts on this thing? Would I buy this again? Well, I'm not a tactical knife kind of guy. One of the main reasons why I bought this knife was some of my viewers asked me about this knife and wanted me to review it. And so there you go. I like to meet the desires you guys have. It really fits within that budget category, being $40 US. That's not bad at all. I like Kubey knives because they've got a long history of making pretty decent quality knives. And this thing is worth every penny that you're paying for it, if that's what you want. As long as you understand, the little limitations and quirks about it. Nothing seriously bad about this thing. The main thing I would change, like I said before, is the size of this forward choil. I'd like it to be a bit bigger. If you don't mind that, there you go. Or if you want to modify it on your own to make the cutting edge come back a little bit, that means the edge is going to be further away if you don't use the forward choil. So, you decide what you want to do, of course. being basically ambidextrous, at least in your pocket, and more comfortable in the left hand than in the right. That doesn't mean it's terribly uncomfortable in the right. It just means it's more comfortable in the left. It's okay. They've got a big chamfer here. If you like to modify your knives, you could always sand this back. You've seen lots of knives with a big scallop here for your fingers. You could bring that back. Just don't bring it too close to the edge. I wouldn't change how thick the flat section of that G10 is. I might just bring back that chamfer a little bit, maybe even on both sides, who knows. And there you go. It's okay. There are glass fibers in G10, so you probably don't want to breathe the sanding dust when you do this. That's going to get in your lungs and try to give you cancer. But of course, it's your life. You do what you want. Comfortable, for the most part. I'd like a little more grip back here. But that's about all the cons. For a big knife, we've got a good edge shape. Mikkel knows what he's doing as far as making an efficient cutting knife. Decent tip for piercing. Strength. For the most part, there's strength here. Kubey's, getting the badging better and better all the time. So that's okay. Lockup's great. It's a solid knife. I like that we've got T8 screws here instead of T6. Flush screws back here. Decent pocket clip. Yeah. Do you have one? What do you think of it? I'd especially like to hear anybody who's got the titanium frame lock version. How's that? And let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much to my supporters of the channel, those of you who help out. Remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.